Erica is not here. Don't you come in here asking where Erica is. Don't you dare. This is You Don't Know Dick. How dare you? How dare you? Hello, everyone. I'm Dick Warlock.
P.S. Ted Cruz, go fuck yourself.
Thank you for the follow. Thank you earlier, Cascadia93 for the sub at Tier 1. Appreciate it.
P.S. Ted Cruz, go fuck yourself.
This is, in fact, live. Erica has a real job, Ocean Astro. I do not. Okay? I don't have a real job. That's why you're seeing me here. I don't have a real job, so I don't have any money. So thank you for the subs, if you can afford them. Appreciate it. The song you just heard was a Palestinian Debka dance song. The Debka is a traditional Palestinian dance. It's beautiful and fun. I absolutely love it. I had a Palestinian friend who used to teach it. I cannot dance the Debka. That what you just saw, the seizure I was just having to that Debka song was not the actual Debka. It's a intricate and beautiful dance that I don't know how to do. He never taught me how to do it. He knew how to do it though. But that song fucking bops, right? This is episode number 7 of You Don't Know Dick. Free Palestine. Well, we'll be talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict. So you might have heard me talk about this on stream with my colleagues before. I should start out by saying that the spelled Debka if you're like me and you try to Google it. Here, I'll put the song in the that is how it's spelled in the YouTube video that I was just listening to. I've seen it spelled a bunch of different ways. It's all anglicized from Arabic. I've seen it spelled Debakah, but Debka is, you can also spell it Dabke. It's Arabic term. But we should start by talking about how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is incredibly complicated. It's not easy to it's not easy to suss out good guys and bad guys when it comes to it, right? It is, and that's not to say that I am not for Palestinian independence and recognize the fact that they. Wait, did Jared not fix it? Yeah. Yeah, Jared Kushner did not fix the Israel-Palestine conflict. I believe that the Palestinian people live under an apartheid state in Israel. They are treated as second-class citizens. They are subjugated and suffer in a variety of ways. And historically, so have the Jewish people and the Zionists who made the country of Israel, as we'll talk about. So I'd ask that you keep an open mind as we talk about the conflict, and recognize the suffering and humanity of all the parties involved. But the thing that we should talk about from the outset is that one trauma and suffering on behalf of one party should never be used to excuse the oppression of another, right? And we'll talk about Cascadia93 says religion is very frustrating. That is a common misconception about what this conflict is about. Well, there's a religious aspect to it, obviously, between the Jews and the Muslims, who happen to be on either sides of the conflict. The conflict is distinctly about territory. It is not about religion. They just happen to be two different religions. They don't have any conflict about which one is the one true religion. This is not the Crusades. The Israel-Palestine conflict is distinctly a conflict about territory. It has religious elements to it because of the different religious characterizations of either side. But there's like a common thing in the discourse about Israel-Palestine where people will get mad because Palestinians will sometimes, when they're being critical or hyperbolic and sometimes bloodthirsty against
I know you're
the
hoping and
Zionists.
praying that maybe we'll have another
Holy
war,
shit.
but it ain't happening.
Coming in with a big raid from Majority Report, 254. Thank you for the raid, Majority Report. Appreciate it. Sam and the gang. Thank you, Raiders. Welcome. You just came into an episode of You Don't Know Dick. This is Jar Jar at the bottom of your screen. He is covered, as you can see. He's wearing a pair of our Left Flank Vet Silkies, which you can buy at our merch store. I am Dick Warlock. I am here talking about
dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive
Israel-Palestine conflict. It's a very complicated thing, and we're going to be talking about it and discussing it. I am not an expert in it, by no means. I do have a degree in Middle Eastern Studies. I got a bachelor's in Middle
Ted
Eastern
Cruz,
Studies.
Go fuck yourself.
That's what I went to college for. I've taken 4 or 5 classes on the subject, but by no means am I an expert. There are people with PhDs who write whole dissertations on tiny aspects of the Israel-Palestine conflict. I am not on their level. I know some basics, and I want to discuss them with you and hopefully share some knowledge that I have.
P.S. Ted Cruz, go fuck yourself. P.S. Ted Cruz, go fuck yourself.
Damn, thank you for all the follows. But feel free to share your knowledge in the chat as well as we go. I'm going to turn off alerts for now since we got the big raid. Xander's in the chat too. What up, Xander? Welcome. Did you come in the raid, Xander, or did you just hop in? Xander Corvus is in the chat, everyone. Can you give Xander a shout out, mods, when you get a chance? Xander is a dope streamer out of Vegas. Does some amazing mutual aid shit out there. Came in on the raid. What up? Xander bought a pair of the Left Flank shorts you can see on Jar Jar at the bottom of your screen. I can't wait to get those shorts out. I'm excited to get my own pair. I don't have a pair yet. They're gonna be dope though. Anywho, let's dive in, huh? I want to start with some dumb shit first. I want to start with something stupid that we can criticize from the get-go. I want to show you how the right-wing chuds talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. So we're going to watch a PragerU video. That's actually me in the picture. I'm a Gungan, and I'm glad I can share with everyone. Xander is of Gungan, and that makes sense because if you don't know, underneath those shorts, Gungan's packing heat. Jar Jar's packing some heat, if you know what I mean. Let's start by watching this fucking terrible PragerU video. Oh, god damn it. Why isn't this recognizing my fucking window? Stand by. There we go. All right. You ready, kids? Let's watch this dumb shit. You tell me what you think.
When I was the Prime Minister of Canada, I was often asked this question: why do you support Israel? My response, in effect, was always the same. Why wouldn't I support Israel? Why wouldn't I support a fellow democratic nation where open elections, free speech, and religious tolerance are the everyday norm? Why wouldn't I support a country with a vibrant free press and an independent judiciary?
Okay, we got to stop there. We are not even 25 seconds into the video. We have to stop to counter some of the lies trotted out by this Canadian fuck here. This is the Reporters Sans Frontières, Reporters Without Borders. We're going to read about free press in Palestine. They're 132nd in the 2021 World Press Freedom Index. Continuing political tension increases the danger of journalism in Palestine. Since May 2018, 2 Palestinian journalists have been killed by Israeli snipers, and dozens have been wounded while covering the March of Return protests in the Gaza Strip, which are continuing. In the West Bank, use of live rounds by the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, to disperse protests exposed reporters to possibility of serious injury. At least 3 Palestinian journalists have permanently lost the use of an eye this way. It is common practice for Israeli IDF snipers to shoot people in the eye with their rubber bullets. They like to maim instead of kill. Maiming is less of a headline. So they will shoot you with live rounds in your limbs, and they will shoot you in the eye with rubber bullets if you are just a Palestinian journalist attempting to cover the conflict, or if you're a protester trying to assert your humanity. The Israeli forces have continued to subject Palestinian journalists to arrest, interrogation, and administrative detention, often without any clear grounds. In recent years, the Israeli authorities have closed several Palestinian media outlets for allegedly inciting violence. For journalists, the price of the political rivalry between Fatah and Hamas in the Palestinian territories includes threats, heavy-handed interrogation, arrest without charge, intimidatory lawsuits and prosecutions, and bans on covering certain events. 1 in 4 Palestinians qualified to vote can vote. Very good, super cool democracy. Exactly, Michael V. Cook. You are absolutely right. They exist purely as second-class citizens, distinctly second-class citizens who often do not have any democratic rights within their borders. Yeah, the only democracy in the Middle East, folks. Yeah, democracy for me, but not for thee, right? Yeah, a lot of old orgs in that area of the world are French. Well, the Reporters Sans Frontières is like Médecins Sans Frontières as well. Doctors Without Borders, right? The French have through their history of colonialism, they also have a history of international humanitarianism. And that's has its own host of issues. The political tension combined with harassment from Israeli authorities complicates the works of Palestinian journalists to the point of self-censorship. Several websites regarded by the Palestinian Authority as opposition media have been inaccessible since 2017. Online platforms such as Facebook and Twitter also sometimes censor information. Under Israeli political pressure, these platforms have deleted content or suspended the accounts of Palestinian journalists and media outlets accused of inciting violence. In some cases, deleted content that has been restored after appeals to moderators, but local NGOs accuse platforms of using double standards in their treatment of Israeli and Palestinian conflict. We should say, too, that they do touch on the fact that Fatah and Hamas both often do suppress the free press themselves within Palestine. So Fatah and Hamas are two Palestinian political parties, I guess you could call them, that are often at odds with each other. They've had direct conflict with one another, but they are both dedicated to asserting Palestinian rights in a variety of different ways. We can talk about that more, but let's go back to this video.
Why wouldn't I support a valuable trading partner and a wellspring of amazing technological innovation? Why wouldn't I support our most critical ally in the Middle East and in the international struggle against terrorism? In a rational world, in a world where simple common sense prevailed, the question, why do you support Israel, would be like asking, why do you support Australia or Canada? But we don't live in that rational common sense world. So the case for Israel has to be made over and over. I, for one, am happy to make it. Let me start with this. Every military action Israel has ever taken has been to protect itself.
Wrong. This is a blatant lie. This is a blatant preemptive attack is not protecting yourself. I don't even know where to begin with this one. First of all, the case for Israel that has to be made is because Israel was not a country until 1948. Israel was not a country until 1948. It is one of the newer countries in the world. Obviously, there's newer ones, South Sudan and the like. There are newer countries, but it is one of the only countries within the past 100 years that it was taken by force. The annexation of territory has been recognized by the international community as being a bad thing in the modern era. Since World War I, we're not supposed to be able to annex territory. But Israel has done that many times. For once, they owned all of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. They still own the West Bank in Jordan. And they took the Golan Heights from Syria. They took those during the 1967 war, which was a preemptive strike against all of their neighbors. They fought Syria, Jordan, and Egypt all at once. And they did preemptive attacks against them. They were distinctly an aggressor. Now, you can make the argument that those countries were preparing to attack them, but that's very much debatable. Very, very much debatable. Yeah, what a fucking Weasley liar, dude. Still lying. Lying to his... Is anyone going to tell Stephen Harper how he's lying to his audience?
Israel is not an aggressor state. It's a defensive state. This has been true from its founding to this day. As a fledgling nation in 1948, Israel was immediately attacked by its...
A fledgling nation. They declared their independence and decided this land is ours now. It is a distinctly Jewish territory. And the Arabs are forced out through direct conflict, violence, and pressure.
Its Arab neighbors. Their goal was not to contain the tiny new country. It was to annihilate it. No nation came to Israel's aid, not the...
It wasn't a nation prior to that. The annihilation was in protection of their people. If you want, I'm not going to disagree with him that, those nations were attempting to annihilate the state of Israel, but the state of Israel didn't exist until days before. Days before, when the Zionists declared themselves. We'll talk about the case for Zionism, too, as we go here, but he's skipping all of the aliyahs up until 1948, all of the conflict leading up to it, the British imperialism that led to it, and the Jewish assertion of their own humanity and rights against imperialism during the early 20th century. We can talk about that too.
The United States, not my country, Canada, not the United Kingdom, no one. They all thought Israel would lose, but it didn't lose. It won. In 1967, Israel's neighbors again sought to utterly destroy the Jewish state, a nation that had then existed for 2 decades. Again, Israel prevailed. And it survived another all-out attack in 1973.
1973 was not an all-out attack. It was attacked by Egypt alone. Probably in cahoots with some other nations around it. 1967, they did kick the ass of all their neighbors, and it is amazing that they did that. An aliyah is just a migration, a group of migrants. An aliyah, there's a couple of different aliyahs, they say, about a migration of the Jewish diaspora. Going to the historical land of Israel-Palestine. So when the pogroms were happening in Russia, whenever groups of enclaves of Jewish people were suffering under anti-Semitism around the world, there was a Zionist movement in the 1800s, in the 19th century, to return to their historical lands of Israel. In the area surrounding Jerusalem. And they began to work their way there. The more they suffered, the more they decided to go there. And this is where we are directly complicit in this conflict to this day. We allowed, enabled, and directly persecuted the Jewish people all around the world. Their communities were devastated by violence and discrimination all around the world, and they would then look for anything to help alleviate some of their suffering, and they turned to Zionism often to do so.
Those are the big wars, but I'm not sure there's been a single day in Israel's entire history when some act of terror has not been waged against it, inside or outside its borders.
A single day? There's some claims in here that I don't even know where to begin with. Aaliyah was a R&B singer that passed away. R.I.P.
There have been 2 bloody waves of terror, so-called intifadas, in the late 1980s and the early 2000s, when Israelis were...
Intifadas were uprisings out of desperation for Palestinian people to assert their humanity against an apartheid state. There's two intifadas. He's going to talk about them here, and we'll talk about them as we go. But think of intifadas as uprisings. Uprisings for a persecuted people. Did they do horrible things during the intifadas to civilians? Of course. Yes, that did happen. It's not good.
Were blown up on buses, at pizza parlors, and celebrating weddings. There have been incursions from terror groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon. There have been thousands of rocket attacks from Hamas in the Gaza Strip, even after Israel completely withdrew from that territory in 2005.
They created an open-air prison around the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is a tiny piece of land on the southwestern tip of Israel, along the border with Egypt. And they did pull out of that territory, historical Palestinian enclave, and they created an open-air prison, which they punished them physically, economically, every way you can think of to this day. It's an open-air fucking plague-ridden mess to this day. COVID is rampant in Gaza and the West Bank.
In between the wars, in between the terror, Israel has sought peace with its neighbors, and it has achieved peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan.
To put this in context, imagine if I'm an Italian man. I want to get a bunch of Italians together here in Virginia. I'm going to get some the Virginia Italian Battalion. We're going to create it. The 23rd Virginia Italian Battalion. And then we take all of Northern Virginia. Me and my Gabagool brothers decide to take over all of Northern Virginia. We take it, we kill, rape, pillage, burn every other non-Italian person out of this territory, declare it an Italian enclave, and then say, why won't you make peace with us to Virginia, Maryland, D.C., the surrounding territories where we've pushed refugees and killed untold swaths of their populations. Why would they want to make peace with me? I just did war against them.
Others, however, every Israeli gesture for peace is met with incitement and violence. I recount this history for one reason. Any nation that has endured what Israel has endured could easily have become a police state.
They are a police state. They are a police state. The Jerelek says, important that we don't equate the violence of people fighting for liberation against an apartheid state and the violence of a colonial power in support of far-right genocidal wings. Yeah, you're not wrong about that. I'm not equating the two. No, they are definitely different. The use of the term terrorism, for example, is an inherently political term. I am against the use of the term terrorism because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. There's no agreed upon definition even of what terrorism means, what the word means, because it's such a politically charged term. And you're going to hear Zionists and allies of Israel, people who are overly critical of Palestinians, of Palestine, use the term terrorism very flippantly. But we're going to talk about something you might not be aware of. The most successful of terrorist groups in the history of humanity. We're going to talk about what that is. And the answer to who that might be might surprise you.
But through it all, Israel has never abandoned its commitment to the rule of law, to democracy, to tolerance. 1/5 of its citizens are Muslim. They enjoy the same rights as Jewish citizens.
Wrong. Outright lie. Outright lie. They do not. As someone said in chat earlier, like a quarter of Muslims, of Arabs within Israel can vote. Free Palestine, baby. In fact, on that note, I have a message that I want to reiterate throughout our conversation today. I gotta find it. 1 second.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
That's right. If you don't know, that's Emmy. That's Emerson. Erica's adorable son. We got him to say Free Palestine on the other night, and Abby cut it for us.
Free Palestine.
Very based.
They occupy key positions in the nation's courts, press, and government, and they have their own parties representing them in the...
It's so ridiculous to make it seem as though they do have like symbolic positions that have no ability to affect change. Not like America in that sense.
In the Knesset, Israel's parliament. To say that Muslims in Israel are the freest Muslims in the region is an understatement. How about this as a human rights test?
Oh, hold up. We got a Zionist in the chat. Let's talk about that. W. Powell says, historically, don't the presence of the first and second Jewish temples, or first and second temples, prove Jewish heritage in that area? Yes, of course. Of course. There is Jewish heritage in that area. Jews and Muslims lived side by side for centuries in Israel-Palestine. For a long time. Both peoples can trace their roots to that land. One of them is in charge.
Prisoners in Israel, be they Jewish or Arab, are well treated, well fed, and have access to the best possible medical care. Parents and spouses of these prisoners know where they are and that they are safe. Who else in the region but Israel can make that claim?
I need to go back and watch that again. I am. That blows my mind.
That Muslims in Israel are the freest Muslims in the region is an understatement. How about this as a human rights test? Prisoners in Israel, be they Jewish or Arab, are well treated, well fed, and have access to the best possible medical care. Parents and spouses of these prisoners know where they are and that they are safe.
Parents and spouses of the prisoners know where they are. Jerlick says, LMAO, we're so free, we keep our minorities in nice cage. Yeah, it's a golden cage. Listen, you know how you used to be worried about where your husband was on Friday night? Now you know where he is all the time. All the time. Just chilling. He's living the fucking life, bro. Xander says American Zionists should put their money where their mouth is and give this whole country back to the natives. Right? That reminds me, Xander, actually, today, like Erdogan, Recep Tayyip, Prime Minister of Turkey, threatened to acknowledge the American genocide against Native Americans in response to our acknowledgement of their Armenian genocide. And it was like, oh no, threaten me with a good time. Oh no. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, go ahead, dude. Please do. Please. Yeah. You right. Yeah, we've gone past nukes. It's time to hit him with honesty. Time to hit him with that truth bomb. How many kilotons of truth do you think America can handle?
Who else in the region but Israel can make that claim? Through all the wars and all the terror, Israel has survived, and especially in the last 20 years, it has thrived. It's known as Startup Nation, and with good reason. Key components of your cell phone and your...
Apartheid state? What about iPhone? No apartheid means no iPhone. Oh yeah? Pro-Israel means you get to keep iPhone. Exactly. Listen, do you think like amazing companies like Theranos and WeWork and SodaStream couldn't have blossomed under Zionist rule? How do you think that couldn't happen in an apartheid state? Absolutely insane.
Laptop were designed in Israel. A drug or a medical device that has saved your life or the life of a loved one may have been developed in Israel.
You know what? Every time someone injects me with a life-saving drug, or I get resuscitated on the table after, fucking Pulp Fiction style ODing, I shoot up and immediately ask, was this produced in Israel, and how do I thank them?
Yet there are leftist politicians, activists, artists, academics, and college students who devote their lives to denouncing Israel, calling for boycotts, demanding it be cut off from academic and professional societies.
Because they actively subjugate an entire race of people. They subjugate people based upon their race and religion. That is the definition of apartheid. That is how we defeated apartheid in South Africa. The global community shunned them, divested from them, and also should mention communist countries like Cuba, Fidel and the gang literally sent military assistance to help Nelson Mandela in Angola. Lilac and Lace. You're probably just joining us. They say, wait, I'm from Palestine. Why are y'all at PragerU? That's like going to InfoWars, the Daily Wire, to judge the USA. Yeah, we suck, but you can get that from less wacko sources. Oh, you're not wrong. I know it's wacko. You're absolutely right. We're starting off this because I want people to get a sense of what the rhetoric is like in support of Israel and how flimsy it is. That's why we're starting here. Don't worry, we're going to go into some other sources. I wanted to start with an extreme example to put things in context for everyone.
Do they denounce the Palestinian leadership that hasn't held an election in well over a decade? Do they denounce the leadership of Hamas, who use women and children as human shields to protect?
Yeah, we got no love for Papa Prager in this chat, I promise you. Women and children as human shields. This is the thing where, like, I kick down a door and I'm ready up with my M4, and an unarmed woman picks up a child and holds it in front of her, and I shoot them both, and I'd be like, I can't believe she killed that baby. I can't believe she killed that baby. I had to murder both of them, and she put a baby up as a shield in front of her. What a coward. Hamas is a political party. Hamas is a political party created by Israel, by the way. Israel propped up Hamas in order to undermine Fatah. They used a more extreme example. Hamas is more extreme than Fatah. I don't think that's controversial to say. They propped up a more extreme example in order to undermine an organization that had more political power than them, in the hopes that it would also turn the Palestinian people to more moderate options. It did not work. It completely backfired on them. If they want to blame someone for extremism in Gaza, or the rise of Hamas, which, like you said, Jesse Ivy, it's actually a political party at this point. You can blame yourselves. You fucking did it.
Protect their fighters. No, they denounce free, vibrant, democratic, innovative Israel. With all the brutal and violent regimes, not only in the Middle East, but around the world, How is one to explain singling out Israel for condemnation?
This is a big, big, big argument that you're going to hear here. Classic whataboutism. Zionists will trot out whataboutism all day. They will say, why are you being so hypercritical of me? There are so many other bad people in the world. There are so many other bad people in the world. Other countries are doing worse stuff. Why are you focusing on my subjugation of the Palestinian people? We call out all of that. Can and should. Absolutely can and should call out all of that. All of the examples that they'll trot out. Yeah, subjugation of anyone is bad. But we have a unique relationship with Israel, and thus Americans have a unique complicity, right? Complicity in the subjugation of the Palestinian people. Because we enable it through our tax dollars. We give billions of dollars to Israel. Complicitosity, that must be it, exactly.
Sadly, only one explanation fits. Anti-Semitism. Do these haters of Israel...
Oh, I thought he was going to say, do these haters. He says haters of Israel. I thought he was going to use the term like just haters, like slang term. You can be critical of Israel without being an anti-Semite. I'm going to say this a few more times. You can criticize Israel without being an anti-Semite. Critiquing Israel and its policy of subjugation is not anti-Semitism. It is not anti-Semitism to assert the humanity of the Palestinians that live under the yoke of Israel. Now, I would also say that there are anti-Semites who hate Israel for anti-Semitic reasons, of course. But boycott, divestment, that does not make you an anti-Semite. Yeah, exactly. It's anti-Semitic to sanction, boycott, and divest from apartheid companies. No. Yeah, conflating Israel with Jewishness is anti-Semitism. This is how Trump is an anti-Semite. Trump buys into every stereotype of Jewish people, and he believes that American Jews are akin to Israeli Jews. They are like literal citizens of Israel. He would do this all the time. He just thinks all the stereotypes about Jewish people are good. He thinks those are good things. So therefore, he can't be an anti-Semite. He supports Israel and he believes the stereotypes about like Jews being fucking money grubbing or something is good as a good thing. Those stereotypes are awful. They're not good. They have led to untold misery for Jewish people. He just acknowledges them as existing and being good. Wrong. You want to be an anti-Semite? Fucking allow Israel to do whatever the fuck it wants all the time.
Question the legitimacy of any other democratic nation.
Yes, dual loyalty. Thank you for English. That was the term I was looking for. Yeah, any Jewish person in the United States who's an American citizen must have dual loyalty to the U.S. and Israel. That is textbook anti-Semitism. There are plenty of Jews in this country who don't give a fuck about Israel. There are plenty of Jews in this country who are vehemently anti-Zionist. Riviera says, hey, just a quick little note for the chat, not calling anyone out specifically. Anti-Semitism is one word, not hyphen, no hyphen. Semitism is not a thing, so it can't be hyphenated. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I'm terrible with grammar shit like that. Thank you, Riviera. That's good to know.
Of any nation, for that matter. Of course, the answer is no. Somehow, they only manage to oppose the Jewish one.
That's wrong. That's wrong. Liberation movements around the globe have supported Palestinian liberation. When they've supported, like, the IRA had a strong relationship with Palestine and their struggle for liberation. Sorry, I'm turning on a fan. It's getting hot in here. 1 second. Meanwhile, this guy thinks every other Middle Eastern country sucks because he's an actual Islamophobe. Yes, Stephen Harper, this guy is an Islamophobe. Absolutely. I actually oppose Saudi Arabia for many of the same reasons I oppose Israel. Yes, you can and should. Absolutely. Lucas says, I hear we got a fucking Zionist in the chat. There's a Zionist in the chat. They haven't said anything hateful, though. No, there's no need to be, like, you can have a Zionist in the chat. You don't get to be an ist in my chat. The LF chat does not allow you to be a bigot. So you can stay here and you can oppose what I have to say all day. I don't care. It's fine. But the moment that you become a bigot, or you, like, somehow assert the humanity of Israelis over Palestinians, is the moment you're going to get yeeted, okay?
The State of Israel has now existed for 70 years. It is one of the freest, most prosperous, most successful nations on earth. Why do I support Israel? Why wouldn't I?
Because I'm a fucking idiot.
Why wouldn't anyone? I'm Stephen Harper, 22nd Prime Minister of Canada for Prager University.
Why do they all look like this, too? How does he look somehow like a more lizard version of Dennis Prager? Like, Dennis Prager is more porcine, if you know what I mean. Do we fuck with Eyes Left? Absolutely. We love Eyes Left. We love Spencer and Mike. We had Mike on the stream one time, Mike Prisner. He's awesome. You can listen to that. We got the VOD somewhere on our Twitch here under the interviews tab, I believe. And then we've also got the audio on our Patreon you can listen to for free. Yeah, we love Spencer and Mike. Yeah, he looks more, this is more lizard. This is lizard Dennis Prager, where Dennis Prager is more porcine. Yeah, they got a contract where they pump out these fucking suits. They all look horrible. Horrible. Mayo, disgusting fucking, like, same color, like, white hair with just a little pepper in it. Ugh. Oh, disgusting. Disgusting humans. We need to clean the slate. Ready?
Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite.
Dude looks like a pipe cleaner.
Please, parasite.
That's right, Emmy. Free Palestine. Oh, thank you for the link, Luke. That's the link to the Mike Prisner interview. That haircut does make me mad. I don't know what it is about this fucking haircut, but it's awful. Absolutely awful. You know what we need as a palate cleanser is a little bit of Debka as well. You ready? Let's wash ourselves of this Prager bullshit. Yalla habibi. Yalla, faddal. How you gonna have your pudding if you didn't have your meat? It's enough pudding for now. We gotta eat our meat. We gotta learn something. These reed instruments you're hearing are called the mijwiz and the argul. Spelling for both is very anglicized. You're more familiar with those instruments than I am, Jessica Diaby. But yeah, they produce an amazing sound, right? That shit fucking bops. That shit fucking bops. We'll listen to some more later. Let's watch this Vox one. I want to watch this Vox one now.
One of the biggest myths.
This is a primer. Now, Vox is a very lib institution. So we're going from a right-wing chud perspective to a lib perspective now. Let's see what Vox has to say about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And this isn't a distinctly ideological argument. This should be a brief and simple history. Obviously, me and Mac were just talking about this. Just recorded an episode of You Don't Know History Mac's pod. Everyone here right now, please go follow You Don't Know History Mac. If we can get a shout out for him, mods in the chat. He's a dope streamer. He has a dope podcast. He's smarter than I will ever be. He knows more about history than I will ever know. And I had a great conversation with him about the movie Black Hawk Down earlier today. But we were talking about how history is inextricably linked to politics. Politics and history are fucking... There's no learning history without learning with sans politics. Even if that's the politics of the time that don't really exist anymore. There's always a political viewpoint that you're going to have looking at history. They're inextricably linked. So let's see what history they have to share with us right now. Oh, damn. Ashleen. Welcome, Ashleen. Thank you for 5 months at Tier 1. What up? Holy shit. We got some dope people in the chat right now. So we got Ashleen from Feminist Critique. Everyone also go, please follow Feminist Critique. Dope Twitch streamers as well. And Dexter Chaco we got in the chat. The battle bard of the left. Please, everyone, go follow Mac, Ajleen, and Dexter. We love all of you, and we appreciate you. And thank you for the subs.
Myths about the Israel-Palestine conflict is that it's been going on for centuries, all about ancient religious hatreds. In fact, while religion is involved, conflict's mostly about two groups of people who claim the same land, and it really only goes back about a century to the early 1900s. Around then, the region along the eastern Mediterranean we now call Israel-Palestine been under Ottoman rule for centuries, was religiously diverse, including mostly Muslims and Christians, also a small number of Jews who lived generally in peace. It was changing in two important ways. First, more people in the region were developing a sense of being not just ethnic Arabs, but Palestinians, a distinct national identity.
And during this time was kind of the rise of the nation state anyways, right? Like people were identifying, instead of, divisions were becoming less about which empire vassal state you were under, which tribe or village you belonged to, and national identities were forming. And this is true of Palestine as well at this time.
At the same time, not so far away in Europe, more Jews were joining a movement called Zionism, which said that Judaism was not just a religion, but a nationality, one that deserved a nation of its own. And after centuries of persecution, many believed a Jewish state was their only way of safety and saw their historic homeland in the Middle East as their best hope for establishing it.
And I want to be clear, too, again, I said this earlier before some people were here. I want to say this again. Max says first, 1848 was the first big nationalist push, but it really took off in the years preceding the First World War and the push for decolonization post-World War II. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Like I said, Mac knows more about history than I will ever know, and he is absolutely right about the rise of nationalism since 1848. And just preceding, the rise of nationalism is basically what led to World War I. that like the nationalist tensions that were rising up, and the nationalist identities led to friction and tensions along the borders of the crumbling empires, and that led to World War One. But I do want to say here, he's talking about Theodor Herzl and the rise of Zionism in this video under Theodor Herzl, creating a national identity as opposed to just a religion for Jews, and that was born of their persecution, their direct, horrifying persecution in many places across the globe. So this is also a way that we are complicit in the Israel-Palestine conflict to this day, because we allowed this to happen to Jews in places all over the world. We allowed anti-Semitism to run rampant. We allowed the Jews to be scapegoated they were a very politically convenient scapegoat. When shit went wrong, you could point and say, it must be the fucking Jews who did it. And we allowed them to be murdered and suffer because of it. And the nationalist identities like this would crop up. There was an argument that they had no other choice for survival, but to be Zionists. Now, Herzl did not say. Here's the thing, too. Herzl would hate Zionists today. The father of Zionism would fucking hate Zionists today. Herzl literally didn't care where the Zionist state was. He talked about putting the Zionist state, the land of Israel, in Africa. He did not care where it was put. Jerusalem was one place, of course, where they had historical ties to the land, but that was just one of the options. Look at the Grotesque Protocols book, got republished through Christian Nations, a plagiarism and a fraud, and it was nevertheless extremely popular. Yes, you're absolutely right, a rate lump. If you're not familiar with what a rate lump's talking about, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a grotesque anti-Semitist piece of literature that's basically like the meeting minutes of some fucking money-grubbing Jews that got together and decided that they were going to take over the world. Here's how we're going to do it. It's a fraud. It's a work of fiction. It was an anti-Semitic work of fiction that was reproduced as though it were real. That here's what the Jews are trying to do. And it was a politically convenient thing to say, like, anytime there was any strife within a country, a complicated issue was happening, it's because the Jews were pulling the strings behind the curtains. It's fucking dumb. Oh, damn, we got KF Logan in the chat, too. What another fucking dope streamer. What up? Everybody go follow Kentucky Fried Logan. I don't think that's what KF actually means, right? Right? I know we like to say that. KF Logan's a dope streamer too. He says, yeah, prior to the Holocaust, most world Jewish opinion was firmly socialist and communist. Yes. Yes. In fact, one of the main reasons that we have a special relationship with Israel is because we didn't want a communist identity to take hold in Israel. It was a bastion of pseudo-white identity in a sea of brown that could also be capitalist, right? We didn't want a communist bastion that could domino theory spread throughout the Middle East as well. So it was part of the Cold War was ensuring Israel was on our side and not the Soviets. The Soviets ended up identifying with some of Israel's enemies eventually. Like there's famous stories of Israeli pilots literally shooting down Russian pilots in the War of Attrition over the Sinai, who were fighting against, who were there as advisors fighting the Israelis on behalf of Egypt. So we did lots of what my granddad called friend making. The Jews did lots of friend making. Therefore, it must be pulling the strings behind the curtain, right? Yeah, we all are complicit in anti-Semitism in the anti-Semitic history. The rise of Zionism is distinctly in response to horrific anti-Semitism throughout the world, and we should acknowledge that. That is important to acknowledge.
In the first decades of the 20th century, tens of thousands of European Jews moved there. After World War I...
Those are the aliyahs we were talking about earlier. The tens of thousands of European Jews that moved to Israel in the late 19th and early 20th century, where they came in different aliyahs. They break it up by territories. It's like different generations of aliyahs. Or not territories, sorry. Different time periods. Different generations of aliyahs. Yeah, all conspiracy theories terminate anti-Semitism. Almost every conspiracy theory has some anti-Semitic element to it. A few of the Q drops were apparently copy-pasted excerpts from the protocols. Yeah. Yeah, conspiracy theorists they try to distance themselves from anti-Semitism because it's not popular. It's not as popular anymore. There are still anti-Semites in the world. Anti-Semitism still has a strong presence in the world. But the conspiracy theorists will try to they'll say globalist a lot instead of Jews. They'll say like financial global elite finance or globalist, and it's a stand-in for Jews.
The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and British and French empires carved up the Middle East, the British taking control of a region...
The Ottoman Empire was conquered in World War I. Collapsed because it was conquered.
Called the British Mandate for Palestine. At first...
1919 to 1948. Right after the Ottoman Empire did not survive World War I, and we carved up all of this area, and Great Britain, the UK, got Palestine.
The British allowed Jewish immigration. But as more Jews arrived, settling into farming communities, tension between Jews and Arabs grew. Both sides committed acts of violence, and by the 1930s, the British began limiting Jewish immigration. In response, Jewish militias formed to fight both the local Arabs and to resist British rule.
So, here's where it gets tricky. Goodbye, Kamak. Thank you for coming. So obviously, like, we're very much anti-imperialism here at Left Flank. And at this time, under the British Mandate system, there was a conflict not only happening between Palestinians and Jews and under the British Mandate, but both of them often were fighting the British imperialists who were subjugating the both of them under the British Mandate. Jewish militias formed as offensive units against the British Mandate and as community defense in conflicts with Muslim Arabs in the surrounding communities, and so did the Palestinians. They both built up arms and weapons to fight the British imperial state and each other.
Then came the Holocaust, leading many more Jews to flee Europe for British Palestine and galvanizing much of the world in support of a Jewish state. In 1947, as sectarian...
Now, obviously this is a brief history, so it's skating over a lot of shit here. But obviously the culmination of the complicity that we were talking about earlier that we have in Zionism, the creation of the Jewish state, Israel, the culmination of that is the Holocaust. We allowed the Holocaust to happen. We allowed 6 million Jewish people to be the Jewish people were nearly exterminated in Europe. We allowed that to happen. Did nothing to stop it. There are whole nations that were complicit in it in Europe. And the world, once that came to light, the world felt so bad about it, they felt like that we should give the Jews a break. And the limitations on immigration to British Mandate to Israel, of Jews to Israel, was one of the ways that we contributed to that. In fact, let's talk about a specific example where the United States contributed to it. The St. Louis. You ever heard of the St. Louis Manifesto? It's a ship full of Jewish refugees coming to the United States, attempting to come to the United States, immigrate to the United States during World War II or leading up to it. They were turned around, and many of them were exterminated because of it. Killed in concentration camps. And then a lot of them ended up become Zionists and made their way to Palestine. There are more Jewish people living in the United States now than there are in Israel, actually. It's almost the same. Yeah, we sold them technology to make the Holocaust happen. Yes, IBM made computers, made punch card systems to log the genocide that they did against Jewish people. We denied the refugees, people trying to come here. Yeah, illegally resettled 50,000 refugees to Israel after World War II. We have a variety of ways we are complicit in this.
Violence between Jews and Arabs there grew, the United Nations approved a plan to divide British Palestine into two separate states. One for Jews, Israel, and one for Arabs, Palestine. The city of Jerusalem, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians all have holy sites, was to become a special international zone. The plan.
Now, this UN proposal, this would have been the best deal the Palestinians ever got. Would have been the best deal the Palestinians were ever going to get. And we flubbed it. Flubbed it. We didn't sell it well to them. And the Palestinians rejected it because they felt that they had a right to all of the land. They felt that, like, the holy site, they wanted control of their holy sites. There was real intrinsic roots, linkages, deeply ingrained beliefs that each side had specific mandates for specific areas of Israel-Palestine. And so this proposal was all for naught.
The plan was meant to give Jews a state, to establish Palestinian independence, and to end the sectarian violence that the British could no longer control. The Jews accepted the plan, and they declared independence as Israel. But Arabs throughout the region saw the UN plan as just more European colonialism trying to steal their land.
They're not that wrong, right? To them, the Jews that came there in the past century are colonizers as well. Now, there were always Jews in Israel-Palestine, but one of the Zionist calls to action to immigrate there was literally the tagline for Zionism was a land without a people for a people without a land. The Jews being the people without a land, Palestine being the land without a people. They would portray it as a place that was completely unoccupied, a pristine land of milk and honey that you could immigrate to and prosper, completely ignoring the millions of Palestinian people that lived there and had for centuries. Jews lived there too. But when the Kingdom of Solomon fell, the Temple of Solomon fell, a lot of them left because their empire had fallen, basically. All the reminiscent of the U.S. in the frontier era? Yes, exactly. It's a colonialism. Say this land is just waiting for you to be plundered. And if anyone is there, they're a savage. They're a fucking goddamn shrunken head cannibal.
Many of the Arab states, who had just recently won independence themselves, declared war on Israel in an effort to establish a unified Arab Palestine where all of British Palestine had been. The new state of Israel won the war, but in the process, they pushed well past their...
Now, we should acknowledge, too, in this war for... The Israelis call it the war for independence. Palestinians call it the Nakba, which means catastrophe. Because it was a catastrophe for the Palestinian people. There was a systematic effort to displace Palestinians from the land. kill them, displace them, and seize their territory as part of declaring Israeli independence. There are Palestinians, generations of Palestinians who have passed down the keys to their houses that they left behind during the Nakba. I say this is the key to, this is a symbol of your right to return to your historical land. Your home was taken from you. Coming up on 100 years now.
Borders under the UN plan, taking the western half of Jerusalem and much of the land that was to have been part of Palestine. They also expelled huge numbers of Palestinians from their homes, creating a massive refugee population whose descendants today.
This was just in 1948. 190,000 in Gaza, 280,000 in West Bank, 70,000 in Transjordan, 75,000 in Syria. This background music is very jarring. I don't understand what the jaunty piano is for. It sucks. You're describing a horrific event for some people. I don't know why there's jaunty piano music. It's not me.
Number about 7 million. At the end of the war, Israel controlled all of the territory except for Gaza, which Egypt controlled, and the West Bank, named because it's west of the Jordan River, which Jordan controlled. This was the beginning of the decades-long Arab-Israeli conflict. During this period, many Jews in Arab-majority countries fled or were expelled, arriving in Israel. Then something happened that transformed the conflict. In 1967, Israel and the neighboring Arab states fought another war.
The 6-Day War of 1967. Syria, Egypt, and Jordan all went to war with Israel at the same time. Israel preemptively attacked them. But there's many, many times in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict where there were border buildups that were there were misinterpretations of signals, basically. Buildups on the border don't mean an invasion is coming. But both sides have misinterpreted that as preempting a war. Jesse T. Ivy says, for context of how recent that is, my neighbor is a descendant of the Palestinian folks in Jordan. For context, it was his great-grandparents that moved. Yeah, 100 years is incredibly recent. Exactly. But we're coming up on third generation removed, right? And the more generations removed, the more time that passes, the less likely it becomes that those refugees get to ever return home. The more time that passes, the more likely it is that they give up and are absorbed into the identity of another nation. Now, the U.S. often does things that can be considered border buildups. Yeah. Cuban Missile Crisis. We put Jupiter missiles in Turkey, very close to the Soviet Union. They did it in Cuba. We flipped the fucking lid. We thought the fucking Armageddon was coming. It's all about what you interpret the intentions of your enemy as. If you believe them to be overtly aggressive and hell-bent on destroying you in the near future, then you'll believe that any movement, any signal to you will be indicative of a larger plot to take you down.
When it ended, Israel had seized the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan, and both Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Israel was...
A lot of people forget this. The 67 war, the Israelis took all of the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Not just this little tiny chunk of Gaza, this massive peninsula. The canal where the big boat got stuck goes right through here. Israel took that whole eastern side of Egypt, this massive peninsula, which is bigger than the state of Israel itself. They don't have it now. We'll get to how that happens. But they took all that territory. And what they would say to this day is what they say about these areas, this territory they've annexed, is that those were more defensible borders. It gave them standoff. They did it all in 6 days. They whooped their ass. It's less about Israeli competence, military competence, and more about the incompetence of the Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian armies, the militaries. Their militaries had a lot of failures. In fact, and they weren't very unified. They all had their own machinations about what they wanted to do, how much territory they wanted to secure, and so they failed to create a united front. They all had schemes working behind the scenes, working against each other, which just meant that they all lost.
Is now occupying the Palestinian territories, including all of Jerusalem and its holy sites. This left Israel responsible for governing the Palestinians, a people it had fought for decades. In 1978, Israel and Egypt signed the US-brokered Camp David Accords. Shortly after that, Israel gave Sinai back to Egypt as part of the peace treaty. At the time, this was hugely controversial in the Arab world. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was assassinated in part because of outrage against it.
This is another trend you'll see in the Arab-Israeli conflict. When leaders make peace, when they even strongmen leaders like Sadat, military dictators leaders, when they attempt to make peace, they get killed. Assassinated by whom was left out? He was assassinated by Islamic Jihad, radical offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. They claimed responsibility for it. But to them, the negotiating with Israel was tantamount to recognizing them as a state. There are still Arab states that refuse to recognize the existence of Israel as a nation state. Even sitting down to negotiate with them or shake hands, like that picture of Anwar Sadat just shaking their hands, Israelis' hands. Was it Begin at the time? No. Fuck. I'm forgetting the name of the Israeli PM at the time. Just shaking that probably sealed his death warrant right there.
But it marked the beginning of the end of the wider Arab-Israeli conflict. Over the next few...
It wasn't Sharon who was murked when he was trying to make peace. That was Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin. We'll get to him.
decades, the other Arab states gradually made peace with Israel, even if they never signed formal peace treaties. But Israel's military was still occupying the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza, and this is when the conflict became an Israeli-Palestinian struggle. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, which had formed in the 1960s to see...
Oh, I got it right? It was Begin? Oh, good. Yeah, like I said, I've taken classes on this, but I don't remember all of the key players, and I don't remember all of the history. It's been a while since I take those classes, obviously, and I'm not an expert. I got a bachelor's degree.
A Palestinian state, fought against Israel, including through acts of terrorism. Initially, the PLO claimed all...
Sharon was in a coma under suspicious circumstances, Frank. That's a good point. That's a good point. And that was shortly after he gave up the Gaza Strip. Sharon was the one who gave up Gaza. Gave it up. Created an open-air prison where they could have no freedom or trade with and closed borders with Israel and Egypt on either side of them. Open-air prison.
All of what had been British Palestine, meaning it wanted to end the state of Israel entirely. Fighting between Israel and the PLO went on for years, even including a 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon to kick the group out of Beirut.
The stillness of the ceasefire in southern Lebanon was shattered today by the sound of guns, bombs, and planes.
The PLO later said it would accept dividing the land between Israel and Palestine, but the conflict continued. As all of this was happening, something dramatic was changing in the Israel-occupied Palestinian territories. Israelis were moving in. These people are called settlers, and they made their homes in the West Bank and Gaza, whether Palestinians wanted them or not. Some moved for religious reasons, some because they want to claim the land for Israel, some just because the housing is cheap, often subsidized by the...
So this is a mischaracterization of the Jewish settlements. The Jewish settlements happened as a matter of state policy. This wasn't just people saying, you know what, West Bank looks cool, let's go move over there. They were subsidized to go do so. It was a political maneuver by the Israeli state to do this. Because they knew that the more people they had there, the harder they would be to dislodge and the more claim they'd have to the land. These are occupied territories that Israel holds. They wanted to put more Israeli citizens, Israeli Jews, into the land so they could claim it as their own. Frangler says, I have friends who had to leave Lebanon after the bombing got too bad. Yeah, the Israelis fucking... Beirut was a absolute disaster zone, and they did horrible war crimes at Sabra and Shatila as well. What was Arafat's position that time? He was chairman of the PLO. Basically, the lead Palestinian political entity, the PLO. Yasser Arafat was in charge of them, and he was ruthlessly in charge of them too. Yasser Arafat had people, disloyal people and rivals within the PLO assassinated. He did like straight up political medicine executions. Their mom was dodging explosions and has PTSD from it. Yes. When Beirut was one of the first war zones of the modern era, where like the protracted conflict meant there was a large population of people living in fear that at any moment a mortar shell or a bomb could drop into your house and kill you and your entire family. It happened day after day after day after day. It was horrifying.
The Israeli government. Some settlements are cities with thousands of people. Others are small communities deep into the West Bank.
If you've always felt a deep yearning for Jerusalem, now is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not only to stand within its gates, but also to build the home of your dreams there.
The settlers are followed by soldiers to guard them, and the growing settlements force Palestinians off of their land.
Yeah, they would say that like the settlers are there just defending themselves. Then they would send contingents of the IDF in to help the settlers push Palestinians off their property, destroy their property, kill them in some cases, antagonize them so that they would attempt to defend themselves so they could kill them. Jewish militias were formed and would be allowed to take heavy weapons and walk through Palestinian territory nearby and do like presence patrols because they wanted to draw fire and have gunfights with them. They wanted excuses to do violence against Palestinians. They wanted to strong-arm their way into their territories via settlement. And the Israelis would attempt to have some semblance of plausible deniability by using those militias and those settlers, but it was incredibly transparent. Even when they were doing things like the Camp David and Oslo Accords.
Divide communities. Short term, they make the occupation much more painful for Palestinians. Long term, by dividing up Palestinian land, they make it much more difficult for the Palestinians to ever have an independent state. Today, there are several 100,000 settlers in occupied territory, even though the international community considers them illegal. By the late 1980s, Palestinian frustration exploded into the Intifada, which is the Arabic word for uprising. It began with mostly protests and boycotts, but soon became violent. Israel responded with heavy force. A couple hundred Israelis, over 1,000 Palestinians died in the first Intifada.
And this is also a trend in the Arab-Israeli conflict you're going to see. Every time there is violence, if a few Israelis are killed in violence, if any Israelis are killed in violence, there will be tenfold deaths for Palestinians. 10 times the amount of for every Israeli that's killed. Palestinians, 10 Palestinians will be killed. JW181 says, so basically playing professional victim, so the occupation optics seem just. Yeah, that's a lot of Israeli politics. Yeah, is playing professional victim. They're always looking to justify their subjugations. Yeah, 1:10 ratio or higher, exactly.
Around the same time, a group of Palestinians in Gaza who considered the PLO too secular, too compromise-minded, created Hamas, a violent extremist group dedicated to Israel's destruction. By the early 1990s, it's clear that Israelis and Palestinians have to make peace. The leaders from both sides signed the Oslo Accords. This is meant to be the big first step toward Israel maybe someday withdrawing from the Palestinian territories and allowing an independent Palestine. The Oslo Accords established the Palestinian Authority, allowing Palestinians a little bit of freedom.
This is when Arafat becomes the leader of the PA, the Palestinian Authority, instead of just the PLO, the political body. Prior to, this is officially recognized Palestinian Authority.
To govern themselves in certain areas. Hardliners on both sides oppose.
Look at this shit. Area A, Palestinian civil and security self-rule. Area B, Palestinian civil governance, Israeli security control. Area C, Israel controls security and almost all governance. Does this map make any fucking sense to you? Do you think that if you're a Palestinian and you live in Area C, then you also work in Area C? Or do you think that you might have to travel through fucking 4 or 5 Israeli checkpoints to even get to work or your business? As you're going to see, it doesn't matter much anyways.
Oppose the Oslo Accords. Members of Hamas launched suicide bombings to try to sabotage the process. The Israeli right protests peace talks with ralliers calling Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin a traitor and a Nazi. Not long after Rabin signs the second round of Oslo Accords, a far-right Israeli shoots him to death in Tel Aviv.
So, Sadat is killed by a far-right extremist after he negotiates with Israel and gets the Sinai returned to Egypt, which was an incredible victory for Egypt. It's a massive, incredibly lucrative piece of territory. He gets that returned, gets dead. Far-right extremists, Islamic Jihad, kill him, or even willing to have that talk. Yitzhak Rabin negotiates the Oslo Accords, is called a Nazi by the far-right Israelis, and is assassinated for even being willing to have that complicated apartheid system of Bantustans, like you said. Thank you for the sub, Trev is in Tennessee. I think Trev is in 10. Thank you. Appreciate it, Trev.
This violence showed how extremists on both sides can use violence to derail peace, keep a permanent conflict going as they seek the other side's total destruction. That's a dynamic that's been around ever since. Negotiations meant to hammer out the final details on peace drag on for years, and a big Camp David summit in 2000 comes up empty. Palestinians come to believe peace isn't coming, rise up in a second intifada, this one much more violent than the first. By the time it wound down a few years later, about 1,000 Israelis and 3,200 Palestinians had died.
There's 3-1. Those numbers probably aren't all that accurate either, but 1,000 Israelis, 3,200 Palestinians. Thank you, JW. I'm glad you're here.
The Second Intifada really changes the conflict. Israelis become much more skeptical that Palestinians will ever accept peace or that it's even worth trying. Israeli politics shift right, the country builds walls and checkpoints to control Palestinians' movements. They're not really trying to solve the conflict anymore, just manage it. The Palestinians are left feeling like negotiating didn't work and violence didn't work, and that they're stuck under an ever-growing occupation with no future as a people. That year, Israel withdraws from Gaza. Hamas gains power, but splits from the Palestinian Authority in a short civil war, dividing Gaza from the West Bank. Israel puts Gaza under a suffocating blockade, and unemployment rises to 40%. This is the state of the conflict as we know it today. It's relatively new, and it's unbearable for Palestinians. In the West Bank, more and more settlements are smothering Palestinians, often respond with protests and sometimes with violence, though most just want normal lives. In Gaza, Hamas and other violent groups have periodic wars with Israel.
Yeah, Jesse says, I'm not sure I like how this video is portraying them as even near equal combatants. True. I think the first characterization I like in this video is the one they just made. Was the absolutely dire state of the Palestinian people writ large now. The suffocating occupation they live under now. They described it in very stark and accurate terms, I think, right there. But yeah, describing them as near peer combatants is not, like, painting that this is any way a symmetric conflict is wrong. This is asymmetric warfare 101. It's fucking David and Goliath. Oh, thank you for giving JW that sub, Megabytes. Appreciate it. That's your 200th gift sub, Megabytes. 200. Damn. You know what? For that, you know what you get?
Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite.
That's right. That's right, Emmy. Red Wizard says, in the so-called rockets Palestinians had, Qassam 1s were not really much of a threat, and less ammo of them, to where the rocket attacks boiled down to using literal bottle rockets compared to an Iron Dome. Yeah, exactly. This feels like I'm shitting on the PLO and Hamas, but it's sure worthily noting one side has a lot more potential for international aid. Yes. One has much more firepower. What do you mean for potential international aid? Vox is one of the kings of doing both sides on foreign affairs. Yes, they are. Yes, that's fucking lib, right? Centrism. Centrism is when you find the middle of two things that are diametrically opposed and assuming that makes you more correct by finding the gray area in between, instead of one being obviously more wrong than the other. Much more power in the backing of world superpowers. 2 tier 1 gift subbies from Kevin B1022. What up? Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. There were many more countries willing to come to Israel's aid than to Palestinian militants. Yes, of course. Of course. Because Palestinians were using a tactic that they deemed as terrorism. And they're basically the idea that the international community's condemnation of Hamas, of the PLO and Fatah and their tactics is because they think that the PLO and those groups use civilian casualties as a matter of policy, as opposed to it being incidental when Israel does it. Even though the scale is not the same. The IDF has killed fucking exponential more civilians than the PLO or the Hamas does. But the Hamas and the PLO would do it as a matter of policy, and that is often the only option available to a lower tier combatant in an asymmetric conflict. Like, if you live under a massive embargo, you can't raise an army and fight in a legitimate conflict under legitimate rules of war, because Israel has deprived you of that ability. W. Powers says, when one side in any conflict has superiority in military and economic spheres, the dominant party prevails. However, where was the Arab world in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? They were there twice. What do you mean? They were there 3 times. You got the War of Independence, you got 67, and you got 73. They lost. Got their asses kicked. Israelis whooped the shit out of them. It was infighting. They developed into different factions. Some good Finkelstein content? Yeah, maybe later. That's not a bad idea.
The fighting overwhelmingly kills Palestinians, including lots of civilians. In Israel itself, most people have become apathetic. For the most part, the occupation keeps the conflict relatively removed from their daily lives, with moments of brief but horrible violence. There's little political will for peace. No one really knows where the conflict goes from here. Maybe a third intifada, maybe the Palestinian Authority collapses. But everyone agrees that things as they are now can't last much longer. Israel's occupation of the Palestinians is too unstable to last, and that unless something dramatic changes, whatever comes next will be much worse.
This video is from 2016, by the way. Yes, Finkel stream. Finkel stream. This is before that horrible violence of the summer of 2018 in Gaza. This is before that even happens. Where journalists were getting their eyes shot out that we read about earlier. In the Reporters Sans Frontières. Also good to note that not many civilians were actively involved in the conflict from the Israeli side, but many Palestinian forces were largely untrained and very hastily trained. Yeah, of course. Of course. If you live under the yoke of a dictator, if you live, you got a boot on your neck at all fucking hours of every day, and you're constantly having to, like, argue with IDF soldiers multiple times a day to get through checkpoints, to tell them that you live there, that you work there, you'd want to fight too. Even if it meant you had a fucking slingshot and you were almost certainly die. At a certain point, you can only take so much. Kevin B says, forgive me, this is off topic if we already touched on it, but didn't they make it illegal in Israel to write about or teach about the Nakba, straight up criminalizing dissent or education against the Zionist vision? Yeah, we kind of touched on that. I mean, it's more, I don't know if it's outlawed by law, Kevin. That's a good question. I haven't heard of that, if that's the case. Oh, hi, Conway. Welcome back from therapy. I hope you're doing well after therapy. It's important. Therapy solidarity with Abby. Let's go. Conway, since you're here, I'm going to play one for you.
Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite.
That's right, Emmy. Oh, I just talked to my mom, but that's kind of therapy. Well, Abby, if you're able to, you should also do real therapy. Everyone should. I'm a big proponent of that. In fact, I got to schedule my next appointment with my shrink. All right, I'm going to put some Debka on while I go use the bathroom and refresh my drink, okay? Enjoy, get some vibes from some awesome Palestinian Debka music, and I will be right back. You ready?
والبارحة ما نمت ومفرق أحبابي ودموع عيني تجري والبلة للثياب عالسور يا خي عالسور. شيل ايوه جابت 12 ولد والشمس ما غاب. علو تقول ما جابت وتقول ما جابت. جابت 12 ولد والشمس ما غاب. راحت تسور النبي حشيت وما تابت. كشفت عن نص طيريها قالت انا بناي ولد.
Hi, I'm
هجرك يا بنايا. هيا اسماعيل يا خيي.
God damn it. I have returned. All right, you guys want to watch some crocodile tears? It's time for some Norman Finkel stream. Let's go. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. During your speech, you made a lot of references.
Yeah.
To Jewish people, as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive when certain people are German, and they're also extremely offensive to people who've actually suffered under Nazi rule.
You know, I feel like when someone emphasizes the first syllable of the word offensive, when they say it's extremely offensive, I know we're not gonna get along. It's like a disclaimer. It's like a signal that it's about to be used as a weapon. So this is Norman Finkelstein has just given a lecture, and he's compared. Oh, you can't really hear her, or me? Let me yeah, I'm gonna put the subbies on too. Oh, you can't even hear her through the tears. I got it. All the sound except the music is kind of low. Oh. Yeah, the music was louder than... Okay, I'm going to crank that up. I'll crank myself up a little bit too. It should be in the yellow. Yeah, she's saying basically that, like, because the Zionists in the crowd, he's comparing some of the Zionists in the crowd, he did apparently to Nazis, which I have problems with. I mean, I would not do that. I don't think... It's not okay for me to do that. He can do that if he wants, as he's about to talk about why. But I don't think that's a fair comparison. I don't want anyone here to make that comparison either. Like, Zionism is not akin to Nazism. I had a teacher in school. She was a Palestinian woman who made it very clear in our class it is not okay to equate the Palestinian apartheid state with the Holocaust. They're not the same. They're not. There is not a systematic genocide being done to the Palestinian people. It's horrifying what's happening to them. It's bad. It is not a systematic extermination of their people. And she, like I said, she was a Palestinian woman, made it very clear that she was not going to tolerate those comparisons in her class. But apparently, Norman Finkelstein did, and he's going to talk about why now. Why he has every right to make those comparisons.
I don't respect that anymore.
I need to turn this up some more. Sorry, it's too quiet.
I really don't. I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile.
Okay, now that it's turned up, let me start it over because it's only a few seconds.
Go ahead.
Hi. During your speech, you made a lot of references to Jewish people, as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive when certain people are German, and they're also extremely offensive to people who've actually suffered under Nazi rule.
I love what she says. When certain people are German and certain people have suffered under Nazi rule. Are you referring to yourself? What the fuck?
I don't respect that anymore. I really don't. I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile tears to the crocodile tears.
King. Norman about to say.
Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite.
That's right.
No. I'm so, folks. Allow me to finish and allow me.
You know what I realize this is too? This is. I feel like this is, I've never had this experience, but this will be the closest I'll ever get to the high that chuds must get when they watch a video of like Ben Shapiro destroys SJW on college campus. Jordan Peterson obliterates blue-haired lesbian. You know, like you know, those stupid videos that like just like chuds being like, watch Facts and Logic rip you apart. Like this is, I get the same high because like I have no sympathy for that woman who's talking to Norman right now. No sympathy for her. Like, it's extremely offensive. When he is simply, his whole project is to assert the humanity of the Palestinian people. Yeah, I drink her tears. I drink your tears. I drink them up.
Allow me to finish. Listen, sir. Allow me to finish. Allow me to finish. Sir, I don't like to play before an audience the Holocaust card. But since now I feel compelled to. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother, please shut up.
This girl came off of the farm in the middle of Ontario and says, sad that people are mean to Germans. I've been oppressed too, don't you know? It takes me a couple hours to get a gullet of maple syrup.
My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family.
You know who she reminds me of? She reminds me of the picture of that person who's screaming no at the top of their lungs when Hillary lost the election in 2016. One was, nah, like dropped to their knees going, nah. This girl reminds me of her.
On my father's side,
the Jews did not take arms against the Germans.
My late father was in Auschwitz concentration.
What did that guy just say what I think he said? The Jews did not take arms against the Germans? First of all, why would that be a good thing? Second of all, they did. You never heard of the Warsaw Uprising, motherfucker? The fuck is that guy even talking about? Like, yeah, wait. Yeah, the Warsaw Uprising was fucking dope. Those people, like, got slaughtered, and they stood up to the fucking Nazi Germans knowing they would probably be slaughtered. They did it and made the Germans treat them worse. Yeah. Why would I'm trying to understand why he would even say that. Like, if the Jews had, if he's thinking that the Jews didn't rise up, but they did, and if they had, the Germans would have been justified in doing the Holocaust. What does he even mean? I have no idea what he's just. Yeah, I think they're all just mad. They're just yelling bullshit.
Concentration camp. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on both sides was exterminated. Both of my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And it's...
I like you can hear there's like a sea of shushing happening. It sounds like a bunch of snakes slithering around there. A bunch of Elizabeth Warren slithering around that crowd in there telling everyone to shut the fuck up.
Precisely and exactly because of the lessons my parents taught me and my two siblings that I will not be silent when Israel commits its crimes against the Palestinians. And I consider nothing more despicable than to use their suffering and their martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. So I refuse any longer to be intimidated or browbeaten by the tears. If you had any heart in you, you would be crying for the Palestinians, not for what's been done.
What? Could I just calm the audience down?
And that guy just said, "Can I calm the audience down?" Yeah, I think Death and Psychedelics was talking about the random audience guy. So we watched this on stream last night, I think it was. This is the closest I've ever seen to like a real life like Aaron Sorkin moment, because Aaron Sorkin sucks shit. He's a fucking horrible centrist lib who believes that like grandstanding moments that like both sidesism actually like change people's minds. He has a similar mind. I bet you Aaron Sorkin thinks Twitch debates change people's minds. Thinks debate culture is good. Because that allows you to have self-righteous indignation moments and stuff, and allows you to like change people's minds. No. Yeah, Sorkin debate lord, exactly. That doesn't work. That doesn't. Yeah, newsroom cold open vibes, exactly. Actually, you guys want to watch here? I'll compare. We can watch it. But this is the closest, the most effective thing I've seen that is close to like an Aaron Sorkin. Moment. This is exactly what it is trying to. This is horrible, horrible centrism. But this is exactly what it's trying to be.
We'll go on to the next question. You, sir.
My name's Steven. I'm a junior, and my question's for Will McAvoy. Do you consider yourself a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent?
I consider myself a New York Jets fan, Stephen. Since
my.
Since it's been brought up, you've almost religiously avoided stating or even implying a political allegiance. Is that because, as a news anchor, you feel the integrity of your broadcast would be compromised?
That sounds like a good answer. I'll take it.
There was a short piece on Vanity Fair's website by Marshall Westbrook. You probably saw it, where he calls you the Jay Leno of news anchors. You're popular because you don't bother anyone.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Jealous of the size of Jay's audience.
Are you willing to say here tonight whether you lean right or left?
I voted for candidates run by both major parties.
This is the ideal politician or American, according to Aaron Sorkin. Will McAvoy. Aaron Sorkin is a liberal who believes that, like, I can't wait to vote for a Republican. I just need one that's good. I just need a Reagan type to vote for. Oh, if I truly hate the audience, the guy who killed Bin Laden. No, I won't do that. I've watched all of the newsroom, by the way. I've watched all of this show. It sucks. It fucking sucks. But it has an effective narrative structure. Like the Bin Laden episode is particularly bad. Particularly not a good example of that. But it exists within its own moral universe that makes you believe that, like, through wit and self-righteous indignation, you can be correct, and people will inherently change they will be unable to deny your moral verisimilitude and facts and logic. We're just going to watch this. I'm not going to watch more Sorkin after this. Let's just watch this. Hold up, chat.
Let's move on to the next question.
I want you guys to see also how Aaron Sorkin thinks that you can trot out some particular stats and then literally do make America great again. He's not the Trump version of MAGA. The lib version of MAGA is about to happen.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm a sophomore, and this is for all three of you.
Oh yeah, this is great too. Aaron Sorkin also great for misogyny. Famous misogynist, like, hey, what if a dumb bitch asked me a question and I've owned her and then she might have sex with me? That's Aaron Sorkin as well.
Can you say in one sentence or less what? You know what I mean. Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Diversity and opportunity.
Lewis?
Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
Will.
The New York Jets.
No, I'm going to hold you to an answer on that. What makes America the greatest country in the world?
Well, Lewis and Sharon said it. Diversity and opportunity and freedom and freedom. You don't look satisfied.
I want a human moment from you. What about the people? Why is America
Not the greatest country in the world, Professor. That's my answer.
You can't say that on TV. America's not the greatest country. What? What did he just... Why doesn't he just coom into the fucking Bible? Why doesn't he just sign up for ISIS right on national television?
You're saying...
Yes.
Let's talk about...
Fine. Sharon, the NEA is a loser. Yeah, it accounts for a penny out of her paycheck, but he gets to hit you with it anytime he wants. It doesn't cost money, it costs votes.
NEA is the National Endowment for the Arts. So James McAvoy, a.k.a. Aaron Sorkin, is about to try to own the libs and the conservatives simultaneously.
It costs airtime and column inches. You know why people don't like liberals? Because they lose.
He is 100% right about that very short statement right there. You know why people don't like liberals? Because they fucking lose. That is the best line Aaron Sorkin's ever written. The most self-aware thing he's ever written. No one likes liberals because you're fucking losers. You're fucking pussies and you're fucking losers.
If liberals are so fucking smart, how come they lose so goddamn always? Hey! And with a straight face, you're gonna tell students that America is so star-spangled awesome that we're the only ones in the world who have freedom? Canada has freedom. Japan has freedom. The UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Australia.
They have more freedom than we do. We don't have freedom, you fucking idiot. Equating like, oh, well, everyone has the same amount of freedom there. Suck my fucking cock.
Belgium has freedom. So 207 sovereign states in the world, like 180 of them have freedom.
All right.
And yeah, you, sorority girl, just in case you accidentally wander into a voting booth one day.
Hey, dumb bitch, sorority girl, in case you wander into a voting booth one day, why don't, here's some infamy, smacks you upside the head with some facts and logic.
There's some things you should know, and one of them is there is absolutely no evidence.
Women. Exactly. Oh, look, women does speak. No speaky lest the man speaky to you, women. Women do be voting sometimes. Person with boobs.
To support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies. Now, none of
Name one of those things, those bad things, well, things we lead the country in, that Sorkin doesn't support himself. I'll fucking wait.
this is the fault of a 20-year-old college student, but you nonetheless are, without a doubt, a member of the worst generation ever. So when you add...
You know what's funny, too? That part right there, this sums it up. You're a part of the worst generation ever. Facebook boomers will share this opening. Oh yeah, she comes back. Hey, dumb bitch, sorority girl. She goes to work for Will McAvoy as an intern, and she's literally just trying to suck his cock all the time. Hey, dumb bitch. You know, remember how I owned you with facts and logic? Why don't you hop on this Johnson? And he's rejecting her because he's too cool and older. Yeah, it's disgusting. It's fucking disgusting. And this is Aaron Sorkin. He does this in every movie. The Chapo book version of this bit? Ooh, I don't know what that is. Yeah, this is lib negging. Exactly, let Lisa Simpson. The Chapo book has a version of this? Ooh, I gotta look that up sometime.
Ask what makes us the greatest country in the world. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Yosemite?
I was confused by what he said at the end there for a while, but he says Yosemite, as in the national park. He's being his little sarcastic bit at the end.
Sure used to be.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So, like, a lot of what he just said is correct, right? Like, the parts that I do agree with that he just said, he's about to negate all of that. Because he's like, the country sucks, and here's how. That's correct. But we're about to do Blue MAGA time, baby. That's right, punishment. Let's go.
We stood up for what was right.
When the fuck was that? When the fuck was that? When the fuck was that? Yeah, this man don't have shit on Finkelstein. You're right. Finkelstein is everything that Sorkin wants to be in terms of being self-indignant and morally uprighteous. But he can't aspire to it because his politics suck shit.
We fought for moral reasons. We passed laws, struck down laws for moral reasons. We waged wars on poverty, not poor people.
When did we wage a war on poverty and not poor people? This is it's literal, just American exceptionalism. America is exceptional. Everything we've done, it is great. Therefore, everything we've done has been great. And now, somehow, we've lost it.
Sacrificed. We cared about our neighbors. We put our money where our mouths were, and we never beat our chest. We built great big things.
We never beat our chest, and we built great big things.
Things, made ungodly technological advances, explored the universe, cured diseases, and we cultivated the world's greatest artists and the world's greatest economy.
The idea of putting the world's greatest economists next to the world's greatest artists will never not be funny to me.
We reached for the stars, acted like men. We aspired to intelligence. We
acted like men. A woman never did shit. If you ain't got a fucking giant cock and balls swinging round, you ain't never done shit in this country. The dumb, wish someone would cut this with the Dumb and Dumber, the diarrhea on the toilet seat. I fight for them. I'm now going to have to do that. You realize what you've done. You put that in my fucking head. Now I'm not going to be able to sleep until I've created that video. Thanks a lot, bro. If you ain't got that Gungan hog, what the fuck can you do? Exactly, Meat Wings. If you ain't got a Jar Jar sized hog that you swinging around, no one with a less than a Jar Jar sized hog has ever done anything.
We didn't belittle it. It didn't make us feel inferior. We didn't identify ourselves by who we voted for in the last election, and we didn't scare so easy. We were able to be all these things and do all these things because we were informed by great men who were revered.
informed. We did great things because we were informed. Great men.
First step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one. America is not the greatest country in the world anymore. Enough?
Let's cleanse our palate real quick.
Please, parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite.
I want you guys to see someone dancing the Palestinian debka. How about that? Women do dance the debka. They're not dancing it here, but women do dance the debka. I know this is very much a dude's rock dance move, but don't get it twisted. Palestinian women dance the debka too, and they fucking own it, that shit. Yeah, it's like an Arab River dance, exactly. It's fucking dope as shit. I love it. Look how good these dudes are. So my buddy who used to teach the debka, it was awesome because when I was walking around college campus, he would just have a group of Palestinian students that he would be teaching the debka to, and I would just yell at him. His name was Ehab. I'd just be like, "Let's go, Ehab!" and he'd get embarrassed when he was dancing the debka. Holy shit, megabytes! 10 tier 1 subbies. Let's go. 210 megabytes. I think I'm going to be making you the Jeep State sculpture at the end of the month. I think it's going to be you. I think you are by far in the lead for this month's gift subbies. If you don't know, chat, what I'm doing is at the end of April here, the top gift sub gifter, if you will, is going to get a Dick Warlock exclusive Jeep State sculpture. I'm going to make you a Jeep out of clay, and I'm going to put the left flank logo on it. It's going to be sick. Thank you for those gift subbies, megabytes. The debka is an awesome dance. It's similar to Jewish dances too. Also, like when people talk about anti-Semitism, Arabic is a Semitic language. Semitism refers to the region. It is like anti-Semitism refers to specifically, now the connotation is, and the definition literally is being bigoted against Jewish people. But the Hebrew language is very similar to the Arab language. They're both Semitic languages. They're referred to as Semitic languages. They're very similar. Yeah, anti-Semitism was invented to refer to Jews only. Palestinians are Semites. Yeah. Yeah, so the origins of the term anti-Semitism and the origins of the terms Semite are different. They're different things. They're different things. I want to check out now. We're done with fucking Aaron Sorkin. We got some awesome Finkel stream going. I want to check out now. There was a video about settlements. Let's watch a video about Israeli settlements.
This is me driving in what I think is one of the most bizarre places in the world. I just crossed over from Israel into the West Bank. If you look at a map of where I'm driving right now, you'll see a jumbled mess of Palestinian towns and villages, which are shown in green, and Israeli settlements, which are in blue. Many people think of this territory as Palestine, but of the 3 million people living out here, almost 20% of them are Jewish Israeli citizens. The Israelis living out here are called settlers. They live in the West Bank, but they're citizens of Israel. As I drive, I'm looking at effectively two different nations woven into each other through decades of conflict. I visited 15 settlements all over the West Bank, talking to people who've decided to pack up and move out into the middle of disputed land. We'll meet them in coming videos, but first...
Yeah, Marcus, I'll be good for another 20 to 30. Marcus is going to hop in and do some news shit here in a little bit. But I want to hold down the fort for another 20, 30 minutes. I got you, bro.
I want to take a look at the maps that help explain how the West Bank got to look like this.
Yeah, this guy is very much sus. He's weirdo lip, I know.
So let's go back to 1948 when the map looked a lot different. Back then, all this land was controlled by Great Britain. And due to growing tensions between Jews and Arabs, the UN worked with Britain to split the land into two states. One for Jews, Israel, and another one for Arabs, Palestine.
Yeah, Marcus has some breaking news, you guys. The United States is racist. Who knew? Who knew?
Jews in the region accepted this plan and declared independence of the State of Israel. But the Arab states in the region saw this plan as just more European colonialism. They didn't accept the plan and instead declared war on Israel. Israel won the war, pushing well past the borders of the U.S.
Once again, the idea that declaring war on Israel, it was a state that didn't exist the day before. It would be like, once again, if I grabbed up all the Italians in Virginia and said, this is now Sicily. This is New Sicily. Northern Virginia is New Sicily. And the United States declared war on me for doing that? They must hate Italians.
UN plan. During the peace negotiations, a ceasefire line was drawn in green ink. It became known as the Green Line. It wasn't necessarily a border, it was just a ceasefire line, with this being the State of Israel, and this section being controlled by Jordan, who had taken control of it during the war. The Jordanians named this newly seized land.
Yes, I don't even know how the Green Line came about. The original map looks like it's designed to create an ongoing war, like a jigsaw puzzle. It says pogo, pogo, pogo. Yeah. It's a very arbitrary line. In fact, most of the lines of the borders between nation states in the Middle East are arbitrarily drawn by Western powers. In fact, it was joked about. I think this is apocryphal. I don't think it's actually true, but it was joked about how like Winston Churchill and a couple of other British bureaucrats literally mapped out the map of the Middle East that they were going to use on like some dinner napkins one time when they were drunk.
And the West Bank because it was west of the Jordan River. The fragile ceasefire remained until 1967 when Israel fought another war with its Arab neighbors. Israel wasn't looking to take over land in this war, but in just 6 days of fighting, it blew past the Green Line and seized a whole swath of land, including the entire West Bank. Suddenly, Israel had a decision to make. Do they make the West Bank a part of Israel and give the 1.1 million Arabs living there Israeli citizenship and voting rights? Do they give the land back to their enemy Jordan? Or else do they let the people create their own Palestinian state? This became a major debate in Israeli politics. Many Israelis saw this war they just won as not just a military victory, but a religious sign that the Jews were meant to return to the place where a huge amount of Jewish history happened, the hills of the ancient Judea and Samaria, which is basically the entire West Bank. So while the government was debating what to do, Israeli civilians began moving into the West Bank without any permission from the government. They just started setting up homes, establishing a Jewish presence in this region. Suddenly, any debate about what to do with
the idea that the Israeli government wasn't aware of those settlement efforts is ridiculous. They were propped up by the state. At the beginning, even if they weren't propped up by the state at the very beginning, the state was aware of them. It did nothing to stop them. They could have, very easily. They did not. They chose not to, and then they chose to encourage them. As a political matter of policy.
The West Bank had to take into account the growing number of Israeli civilians that were living there. But the rest of the world did not approve of this. As the settler presence grew, the UN issued a resolution saying that the settlements had no legal validity and that they constitute a serious obstruction to achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. They were basically saying that this settler activity was totally illegal. Two different narratives emerged here. One said that Jewish civilians were moving on to mostly empty plots of land that they had captured in a war, and that had deep historical and spiritual significance to them.
Captured in a war. Yeah, Irate Lom says, we weren't trying to annex new territory, honest. We captured this territory in a war fair and square. No one was there because we literally shot at them until they left. You fucking kidding me?
The other side, which is the side that most of the world took, said that these settlers were colonizing land to expand their nation. In spite of international condemnation, the number of settlers in the West Bank grew. Over the next few decades, more and more factions of the Israeli government began to support the settler movement, allocating public resources and granting permits for building. The Israeli housing ministry and military began to...
This dude is lending a lot of credence to bullshit, Abby. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of material that we can look at that is from a Palestinian leftist perspective. These are I want to show these because these are prominent news outlets, media outlets. I want you guys to see what the propaganda is from lib institutions that have a vested interest in making sure that Israel is shown in a beneficial light, and then right-wing chuds who straight up are like Christian Zionists, like the Kufi guys. Guys familiar with Kufi? Christians United for Israel. I am absolutely right. Exactly. Kufi is Christians United for Israel, and Kufi, those Christians are psychotic people who want the end times to come about. They believe through supporting Israel, the end times will come. Yeah, Vox is 100% lib, and it's sad so many progressives give them credence and deep throat their shit. You're right. I give no credence to Vox here. What I want to do is have material for as an explainer that I can help to put in proper context here. Why did I think Kufi was spelled with a K until someone typed it out? Because probably like Kufar? Kofi Annan, maybe?
Developing plans on how to develop the West Bank. They built roads throughout the entire region, allowing easy access between the settlements and mainland Israel. More and more building permits were given out, and planned communities began popping up all over the West Bank. The settlements slowly shifted from a fringe group of motivated civilians to an institutionalized part of Israeli society, totally supported by the state. Here are the Palestinian towns in the West Bank. Watch how the settlements weave throughout these Palestinian towns. Palestinians didn't like this encroachment. They began protesting, often with extreme violence. Between the violence and the condemnations from the international community of the settlements, the situation became unsustainable. So, in the mid-1990s, American President Bill Clinton, Israeli Prime Minister...
Yeah, Abby has a point. Abby's Arabic is 10 times better than mine. I took Arabic when I was in college too. I can read it, like I know the Arabic alphabet, but my speaking and my comprehension, my reading comprehension and my listening comprehension is not good. Abby's is 10 times better because Abby grew up learning Arabic. So Abby rightfully critiques my Arabic pronunciation all the time because I learned it when I was much older and I'm not very good at it.
Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat signed the Oslo Accords, agreements that established a Palestinian government and split the West Bank into 3 sections. Area A gave Palestinians total control over security and government. This makes up about 18% of the West Bank, but most of the Palestinian population centers are here. This was a big deal because it gave Palestinians self-rule for the first time. Area B was designated for Palestinian government control while retaining Israeli security control, meaning the Israeli military remains very present there. Area B is about 22% of the West Bank. Area C remained completely under the Israeli military and government control. This is where all the settlements are, in Area C. It's about 60% of the West Bank. So this is
So, to reiterate, Area A is the only fully autonomous area in the West Bank for Palestinians. Area B is half autonomous. Area C is fully no pretense of Palestinian control, and that is 60% of the West Bank. Conway makes a good point. So Area B and C are basically the same if Israel's army is there. True. To a certain extent, Conway, you're right, because the Israeli army can decide to revoke any of the Palestinian governmental controls at any point that they want. But in Area B, they do have some semblance of Palestinian governmental control. They can make some decisions and even convince the Israeli army not to intervene when they make some decisions, you know? But a key point of the Oslo Accords, which I'm not sure they're going to cover here, was that there would be no more new settlements. And that was almost immediately, as the Israeli government became more right-wing after Rabin was murdered, was assassinated because of the Oslo Accords, as it becomes more right-wing, settlements increase. So this Oslo Accords agreement is basically all for naught. The only one who adheres to it is the Israeli government in a cursory sense in its control over the Palestinian people. They didn't adhere to a basic tenet of it, which was don't allow any more new settlements. The Israeli military was literally supposed to stop new settlements. They didn't. They enabled them.
Basically how we ended up with this mess of a map. Israelis can come and go from mainland Israel through really nice roads that go straight to the settlements. They call these roads flyovers because they bypass Palestinian villages and give easy access from one settlement to the other. But not every settlement has one of these flyover roads. Palestinians can drive on almost all the roads in the West Bank, but their movement is often more difficult, more restricted. They have to stop at checkpoints and get their car inspected sometimes. Sometimes it makes for some really long lines. But certainly one of the most difficult aspects.
He's being flippant about this. It is a daily occurrence in which they have to go through multiple checkpoints a day. Those lines are long, and they multiple of them every time they try to get in a car. He's being very flippant about this incredible amount of inconvenience to people to do basic things that we take for granted every day. In fact, the group of Palestinian students, Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, who I was supportive of when I was in college. I didn't do many actions with them, but like my Palestinian friends were in SJP. They did a thing where they pissed off college students on our campus by intentionally creating security borders where they would stop people going to class and say, hey, like, we need to see your student ID and stuff, like, before you can go through here. Where are you going? Who are you? Do you live around here? Do you live in one of the dorms? As a form of protest, they created like a security wall to demonstrate to the students what Palestinians go through every day. And of course, the fucking privileged ass little college kids lost their fucking minds.
Of this carved up land situation is how it hinders Palestinians from being able to build an economy. Area C, which is under Israeli control, contains the majority of the West Bank's agricultural land, as well as the water and mineral resources. Palestinian companies are severely restricted in accessing these resources, which takes a huge hit on their economy. So with these three sections agreed upon by both sides, the settlements continued to grow in Area C. But in 2005, something happened that would ignite even more passion for the settler movement in Israel. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon decided to remove 8,500 settlers from the Gaza Strip, which was another disputed area where there was a lot of settlements. Seeing Israelis forcibly evicted, their homes demolished, left a huge mark on the country, especially the settlers.
This is one of the examples of Israeli settlements being disbanded. 8 to 10,000 people from the Gaza Strip. A very small area. They crammed that many people in this fucking tiny strip of land. And then they got real pissed when the Israeli state, these fascists came in and destroyed their homes. Those people were compensated. They were provided for by a socialist state. Israel has a very socialist structure in their state. If you are a full-blooded, a first-class Israeli citizen, you're taken care of. It's a fucking bastion of socialist success, other than the horrific oppression of their second-class citizens. And this tiny little bit, these 8 to 10,000 people that were made to suffer by having to surrender their fucking state-sponsored trailers they had dragged into the Gaza Strip, and they were provided with new homes, traumatized the whole country. Imagine being a Palestinian and having your date farm, your fig trees, burned to the ground by some psycho settlers who just decided that they didn't want you, they were too close to their fucking bullshit trailers, with their high-tech trailers with AC and satellite TV. And they burn your fucking your whole livelihood to the ground and tell you to get fucking lost. Imagine an Israeli soldier coming into your house in the middle of the night, into your house, you've lived there your whole life, and saying, sir, you are now occupying an Israeli military zone and you need to leave immediately. What do you mean? This is my home. No, this is now a military area. You're mistaken. You need to leave immediately. You're a part of an Israeli military occupied area. I've designated this a military zone.
Immediately redoubled their effort to settle the West Bank, and the numbers continued to grow. Most people who think about a resolution to this conflict propose a two-state solution, meaning giving the Palestinians a state somewhere in this West Bank region. But if you look at this map, you can start to see that it's getting harder and harder to do that. The settlers living in the—
Why, bitch? Why is that getting harder and harder to do? Why is that hard to discern? Oh, look, here's all these Israeli settlements where there weren't ones before. I wonder why this is so hard. Jesse Ivy says, I know you're not necessarily an expert on the subject, Dick, but as you understand it, what's policing/military involvement in civilian life look like in Israel? It depends on where you live. It's arbitrary. Like these A, B, and C zones determine a lot of how involved the military is in your life. But like I said before, if you live in A and have to work in C, then your life is a lot harder. If you live all in A, you have less to do with the Israelis. If you live in Gaza, you're in an open-air prison. If you live in Israel proper, you're still a second-class citizen often. You're like a part of the service state. And you're viewed with suspicion all the time.
the West Bank are not living in tents or caravans. They're living in developed communities with schools and hospitals and even a university. It's not going to be that easy to uproot these communities. In the next video, I'll go inside the settlements and talk to the people who are living there.
Jewish people have come home. That's not going to change.
Who are these nutcases who are moving out of their own will into this battle zone? They fail to realize the lifestyle that we actually have here.
I don't consider myself a settler, maybe, but I know other people do just because I cross a certain line and I go through a certain code.
Oh, so I should make a point about this too. This woman, I know it's easy to condemn her. It's easy to condemn her, but often there are literal financial incentives to go be a settler. The Israeli state will literally subsidize you at a greater rate. And if you live in relative poverty in Israel, even though it is a very socialist state, or I should call it it's a social democracy, basically, democracy. You have a financial incentive to go be a settler. These are the poorest of the people who are going to be these settlers. Palate cleanser. Oh, this is awesome. 1 second, let me fix it so you can see all of it. Oh. Taylor Swift update says, as most of you know, I haven't been very active in the past couple of months because I was in prison. Sad face. I'm back now, though. More Taylor Swift updates coming soon. Oh my god, why? I refuse to join the IDF LMAO. Conway says she apparently had lots of gay sex in prison, too. Oh, yeah. I don't doubt that. The weird thing about Israel is that it is also like it's very much accepting of the LGBTQ community as well. Also, Israel do the thing too. Like you will often see propaganda, IDF propaganda, which is just smoke show Israeli women like holding a gun and being in the IDF, just being like, "Hey boys, don't you want to come to Israel and hang out with this hot piece of ass? Don't you want to join the IDF? Defend Judaism? You might get laid with some lady that's out of your league." Yeah, Gal Gadot did that. Gal Gadot is literally like an IDF smoke show. And taught yoga. Oh shit, I can't say smoke show. You're right. Fuck. No, that's okay. White Boy Summer's cancel. I'm a wife guy. Wife guy means I can. Revolver also thought with 4 months at tier 2. Damn, what up? Thank you for the support, Revolver also thought. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Revolver also thought. Here, this is for you.
Parasite. Please, parasite. Please, parasite.
As a wife guy, you can only talk about your smoking hot wife. Oh, come on. That's not true. I do have a smoking hot wife. I'm very fortunate in that. You should tell your wife that she is smoking hot as part of Wife Guy Summer. Definitely. But it's stupid. Let me offer you some advice. By the way, me and Kenzo Shibata are going to do a wife guy advice stream or pod sometime soon. I'm not sure when. Yeah, Smoke Show Wife, exactly. But if I want to offer you some, I'll offer you some wife guy advice ahead of time. This one's free, all right, for you guys. If you're a wife guy, you and your partner, a cornerstone to any healthy relationship is that you can submit questions. Let me pull it up. I'll put it in the chat right now. Where's Kenzo's? Kenzo made a Google Doc. I should have saved it. But if you are in a relationship with anyone, if you're a same-sex relationship, hetero relationship, doesn't matter. What everyone should get used to is the idea that you and your partner can and should be able to acknowledge the attractiveness of people of the opposite sex and the same sex. I'm a big believer in this. I tell my wife all the time, that dude, that's a hot dude. You know, like I can acknowledge that, like, why she might be attracted to a dude that I also can easily acknowledge. Like you have to, it helps you lay bare your own insecurities. You know what I mean? Like, me and my wife are in a monogamous relationship. We're not poly, which is fine if you are. I make no judgments about that. But, oh god damn it! How did I just somehow just backed my way out of? There we go. I make no judgments about being poly, but regardless, you should be able to acknowledge other people. Thank you. I love you. Speaking of, look. Smoke Show Wife. If you're nice to her, she'll bring you pasta. Yeah, I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, that dude's fucking hot. I know what you mean. Like, I'll find dudes attractive that she doesn't, you know? Which I think probably means that, like, obviously sexuality is a spectrum, so it's probably just me being a little bit gay. But I also acknowledge that women are attractive too, right? Yeah, the idea that you magically stop being attracted to other people once you're in a monogamous relationship is very bad. Exactly. I agree. She doesn't like to say it as much as I do. I will acknowledge for her that I think, like, I'll see her make a face or something if, like, a dude comes on screen or a lady, and I'll be like, yeah, right. And she'll agree. She'll be like, yeah. But it's good and healthy for you to acknowledge that. There we go. Here it is. Here's the form. Ask the wife, guys. Your Twitch name, your email, and your question. Toxic monogamy. Smoke show marriage means acknowledging other smoke shows? Yes, that's okay. And it's hard sometimes because people are naturally insecure, right? Took me a long time to get over my own insecurities. You know? And I have been in relationships where I was much more insecure when I was younger and dumber. I've been in relationships where I was like insecure and more controlling and like, I don't know, like more, I don't know, than I am now. Like, cause I was younger and more mature and stupid, you know, relationships where I acted like me and my partner were both unhealthy and insecure with each other. But like the more like less insecure you can be and acknowledge that like you love each other and you're committed to one another, the more healthy your relationship is. You gotta learn to sit with your insecurity because it's not your partner's responsibility. Yes. All right, fellas, new rule for white boy summer. No, new wife guy summer. Revolver also thought says, me too. I'm in my first relationship where insecurity is constantly checked and dealt with, and it's so healthy and great. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a trope. Like, it's like a what do you call it? A trope, I guess. But like, communication is incredibly important in a relationship. Like, my wife gets mad at me sometimes because I can tell when something's bothering her, and she doesn't really want to talk about it, but she says she doesn't. And I'll bug her until she tells me what's wrong, you know, because she just wants to let it go. But I'm like, I feel like I've done something wrong, and I want to talk about it, you know. And sometimes she genuinely doesn't want to talk about it, and I let it go. But often it's just better for me. Like, I need to air that shit out when I get mad about some shit. Like, I need to air that shit out, you know. I don't like to let it fester. Marcus, we should probably switch, but I'd be like, so you host, but I'd be happy to stick around for a little bit while you do some of the news if you'll have me. I am going to have to take off here shortly, but I'd love to stick around for a little bit if you would like. Revolver also thought says, I'm with two folks who have been together for 10 years. I've been around for a year or so, and we all kind of help each other, and learning to adapt to other people's conflict styles and insecurities, and made me so much better dealing with mine. Nice. Sad I missed a Palestine, John. Well, let me sum it up for you. Right quick. Awesome thought.
Please, Palestine. Please, Palestine. Please, Palestine. Please, Palestine. Please, Palestine. Please, Palestine.
If you want to encapsulate what we're talking about here, you go right ahead and just listen to Emmy, the wise words of Emmy.
Please, Palestine.
He'll tell you what for.